The year was 2098, and Earth had become a place of contradictions. On one hand, humanity had achieved remarkable things. Cities floated on oceans, robots worked alongside humans in factories, and medicine had advanced to the point where diseases that once wiped out millions were now considered ancient history. Yet, for all its progress, humanity remained deeply divided. Wars still simmered in forgotten corners of the globe. Political arguments raged over resources, and people argued endlessly about whether it was worth spending money on space exploration, when there were so many problems right here on Earth. Arthur Davis was one of those who firmly believed that space exploration was nothing more than a waste of time and money. A tall man with sharp features and an even sharper tongue, Arthur was a well-known economist whose opinions carried weight. He often appeared on television shows and wrote articles criticizing governments for pouring billions into programs designed to explore the stars. "Why should we care about what's happening light years away?" he would say during interviews, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "when we can't even fix the mess we've made here?" His words resonated with many, especially those struggling to make ends meet in a world where wealth inequality seemed to grow wider by the day. Claire Simmons, a journalist famous for her biting commentary, shared Arthur's views. With her sleek, blonde hair and confident demeanor, she had built a career tearing apart anything she deemed impractical or wasteful. Claire loved to mock scientists and engineers who dreamed of finding alien life. "Aliens? Really?" she once wrote in a widely read article. "If they exist, why haven't they shown up yet? Maybe because they're too busy laughing at us, while we squabble over politics and pollute our own planet." Her articles were shared millions of times, fueling public skepticism about space exploration. While Arthur and Claire dominated headlines, others quietly worked behind the scenes, driven by curiosity rather than fame or fortune. One such person was Dr. Benjamin Carter, an astrophysicist employed by the Global Space Initiative, GSI. Unlike the flashy personalities seen on TV, Benjamin was soft-spoken and unassuming. He spent most of his days hunched over computer screens, analyzing data collected from telescopes scattered across the globe. To him, space wasn't just a distant frontier. It was a mystery waiting to be unraveled. Benjamin had always been fascinated by the idea of extraterrestrial life. As a child, he'd stare at the night sky, wondering if someone, somewhere, was looking back at him. Now, as an adult, he dedicated his life to answering that question. But lately, his work had grown increasingly frustrating. Budget cuts and shifting priorities meant fewer resources for projects like his. Many at GSI dismissed his research as irrelevant, urging him to focus on more practical matters. Still, Benjamin refused to give up. Something deep inside told him that the answers he sought were out there, hidden among the stars. One evening, as Benjamin sifted through reams of data, something unusual caught his eye. A series of signals coming from a distant star system didn't match any known natural phenomena. They were faint, almost imperceptible, but they followed a pattern, a rhythm that suggested intelligence. Excited, Benjamin called Rachel Monroe, a young engineer who occasionally collaborated with him. Rachel was brilliant with a knack for solving problems that stumped others. She also happened to share Benjamin's passion for space exploration. When Rachel arrived at Benjamin's lab, he eagerly showed her the data. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a graph on his screen. "These signals aren't random. There's structure here. It could be a message." Rachel leaned closer, her brow furrowed in concentration. After a moment, she nodded. "You might be onto something, but how do we prove it?" Together, they decided to dig deeper. Using outdated equipment salvaged from decommissioned satellites, they spent weeks analyzing the signals. The work was tedious, requiring long hours of staring at numbers and graphs, but neither complained. Both knew the potential significance of their discovery. If these signals really did come from intelligent beings, it would change everything. As they worked, news outlets continued to amplify voices like Arthur's and Claire's. Public opinion turned against space exploration, with critics arguing that humanity should focus on fixing its own problems before worrying about what lay beyond the stars. This growing negativity made it difficult for Benjamin and Rachel to gain support for their project. When Benjamin tried to present his findings to his superiors at GSI, they dismissed him, telling him to focus on more realistic goals. Frustrated but undeterred, Benjamin and Rachel decided to take matters into their own hands. They needed someone outside GSI who might believe them, someone willing to take a risk. That's when Rachel suggested reaching out to Daniel Harper, a retired astronaut known for his unconventional methods and outspoken nature. Though skeptical, at first, Daniel agreed to meet with them after hearing about their discovery. Daniel listened intently as Benjamin explained the signals and their possible implications. When he finished, Daniel leaned back in his chair, stroking his grizzled beard thoughtfully. "If you're right," he said finally, "this changes everything. But you'll never get anyone official to listen, not with people like Arthur Davis running their mouths." "So what do we do?" Rachel asked. "We go rogue," Daniel replied with a grin. "Let's send a probe to check it out ourselves." The trio quickly devised a plan. Using spare parts and old technology, they built a small unmarked probe capable of traveling to the coordinates indicated by the signals. To avoid detection, they disguised the launch as part of routine maintenance operations. No one suspected a thing. As the probe hurtled through space, Benjamin, Rachel, and Daniel monitored its progress anxiously. Days turned into weeks, and just when they began to worry that the mission had failed, the probe transmitted its findings back to Earth. What they saw left them speechless. On the monitor, a massive fleet of alien ships loomed silently against the backdrop of space. Their shapes were unlike anything humanity had ever imagined, sleek and angular with surfaces that shimmered like liquid metal. The sight filled them with awe and dread. Were these beings friendly, or had humanity stumbled upon something far more dangerous? For a moment, none of them spoke. Then Rachel broke the silence. "We need to tell someone," she said softly. "No," Benjamin replied firmly. "Not yet. If we reveal this too soon, it'll cause panic. We need to understand what we're dealing with first." Daniel nodded in agreement. "He's right. Let's figure out what these aliens want before we sound the alarm." Little did they know, their discovery would set off a chain of events that would test humanity's very survival. For now, though, they could only watch and wait, hoping they hadn't awakened something they couldn't control. The discovery of the alien fleet weighed heavily on Benjamin, Rachel, and Daniel. They spent hours staring at the images transmitted by the probe, their minds racing with questions. What were these ships doing so far from Earth? Were they aware that humanity existed? And most importantly, what did they want? The three of them knew they couldn't keep this secret forever, but revealing it too soon could have disastrous consequences. Benjamin was especially torn. As a scientist, he believed in transparency and sharing knowledge for the greater good. But as someone who had faced ridicule and dismissal his entire career, he also understood how fragile public trust could be. If they announced the existence of an alien fleet without evidence of its intentions, fear would spread like wildfire. Governments might panic and retaliate, or worse, people might turn on each other in confusion and anger. He imagined the headlines. Astrophysicist claims, "Alien invasion imminent," followed by mockery from skeptics like Arthur Davis and Claire Simmons. No, they needed more information before going public. Rachel, ever the problem solver, suggested sending another signal to the fleet. "If they're intelligent, maybe they'll respond," she said one evening as the trio gathered in Benjamin's lab. Her voice was calm, but her hands trembled slightly as she typed commands into her laptop. "We can try to communicate directly instead of just watching them." Daniel frowned, leaning back in his chair. "You think they'll answer us?" he asked, scratching his chin. "What if they see our message as a threat?" "It's worth the risk," Rachel replied firmly. "We already know they're out there. Ignoring them won't make them go away. At least this way, we'll learn something." Benjamin hesitated. The idea of contacting an unknown species was terrifying, but Rachel had a point. Sitting idly while the fleet loomed in space wasn't helping anyone. After a long pause, he nodded. "Let's do it," he said quietly. "But we need to be careful. We don't want to send anything aggressive or confusing. Over the next few days, the team worked tirelessly to craft a simple, non-threatening message. They used basic mathematical patterns, sequences of prime numbers, and included visual symbols representing peace and cooperation. It wasn't perfect, but it was the best they could do under the circumstances. When the message was ready, they transmitted it through the same network of satellites that had sent the probe into deep space. Then came the waiting. Hours turned into days, and still, there was no response. Doubt began to creep in. Had the aliens received their message? Did they understand it? Or had they simply ignored it? Each unanswered question gnawed at the trio, making sleep nearly impossible. Meanwhile, life on Earth continued as usual, or at least as usual as it could be in a world increasingly divided by greed and apathy. Arthur Davis appeared on yet another talk show, mocking GSI and its waste of taxpayer money. His words carried weight as always, and viewers ate up every syllable. "These so-called scientists are chasing ghosts in the sky," he declared, smirking at the camera. "Instead of solving real problems, they're wasting billions on childish fantasies. Aliens, really? Let's focus on fixing our own backyard first." Claire Simmons echoed his sentiments in her latest article, which went viral within hours. "Why bother looking for life beyond Earth when we can barely manage life here?" she wrote. "Starving children, polluted oceans, crumbling infrastructure. These are the issues we should care about, not fairy tales about little green men." Their rhetoric only fueled public disinterest in space exploration. Politicians began cutting funding for programs like GSI, redirecting resources toward domestic projects. For Benjamin, Rachel, and Daniel, this was both infuriating and heartbreaking. They knew they were close to uncovering something monumental, but without support their efforts felt futile. Just as hope seemed lost, the unthinkable happened. Late one night, as Benjamin sat alone in his lab reviewing data, an alert popped up on his screen. The signal, an unmistakable reply, had come from the direction of the alien fleet. His heart raced as he scrambled to decode the transmission. It wasn't in any human language, of course, but the patterns were clear, structured, deliberate, and undeniably intelligent. Within minutes, Rachel and Daniel arrived, alerted by Benjamin's frantic phone call. Together they analyzed the message, piecing together fragments of what appeared to be coordinates pointing to a specific location near Proxima Centauri. The implications were staggering. Not only had the aliens responded, but they were inviting humanity to meet them, or at least that's how it seemed. "This changes everything," Daniel whispered, his voice thick with awe. He paced the room, running a hand through his graying hair. "If we follow these coordinates, we might finally get answers." "But how do we explain this to anyone?" Rachel asked, biting her lip. "Even if we show them the message, they'll never believe us. People like Arthur and Claire will twist it into some kind of conspiracy theory." "She's right," Benjamin agreed, rubbing his temples. "We need proof, not just signals and coordinates. Something tangible." An idea began to form in Daniel's mind. "What if we send someone to investigate?" he said slowly. "Not a probe this time, but a person. Someone who can gather real evidence and bring it back." Rachel's eyes widened. "Are you serious? That's insane. Even if we could build a ship capable of reaching those coordinates, who would volunteer for something like that?" "I would," Daniel said without hesitation. "I've been to space before, I know the risks, and I'm willing to take them. Besides, if we don't act now, we might lose our chance." For a moment, silence filled the room. The weight of Daniel's offer hung heavy in the air. Finally, Benjamin spoke. "If we're going to do this, we need to plan carefully. Every step has to be precise. One mistake, and we could expose everything, or worse, put Earth in danger." Rachel nodded, determination replacing her earlier doubt. "Then let's get to work. We don't have much time." Over the next several weeks, the trio threw themselves into preparing for the mission. Using outdated equipment and scavenged parts, they modified a small spacecraft originally designed for orbital research. It wasn't ideal, but it was all they had. They equipped it with advanced communication systems, life support modules, and cameras capable of capturing high-resolution footage. Every detail mattered. Failure wasn't an option. As the launch date approached, tensions ran high. None of them slept much, consumed by the enormity of what they were about to attempt. Daniel spent hours reviewing flight plans and emergency protocols, knowing that even the smallest oversight could doom the mission. Rachel double-checked every piece of equipment, ensuring it functioned perfectly. And Benjamin monitored incoming data from the alien fleet, searching for any sign of movement or change. Finally, the day arrived. Under the cover of darkness, the spacecraft was transported to a remote launch site and prepared for departure. Daniel suited up, his expression a mix of excitement and apprehension. Before climbing aboard, he turned to Benjamin and Rachel. "No matter what happens," he said, his voice steady, "don't lose faith. Humanity needs to know the truth." With that, he climbed into the cockpit and initiated the launch sequence. Moments later, the engines roared to life and the ship ascended into the night sky, leaving behind a trail of fire and hope. Back on the ground, Benjamin and Rachel watched until the craft disappeared from view. Exhaustion and anxiety settled over them like a heavy blanket. All they could do now was wait and pray that Daniel returned with answers. Unbeknownst to them, however, their actions had not gone entirely unnoticed. Somewhere in the vast expanse of space, the alien fleet stirred. Sensors detected the approaching spacecraft, and its occupants debated how to respond. Some argued that contact should be avoided at all costs, while others saw an opportunity to test humanity's resolve. As Daniel hurtled through the void, closing the distance between Earth and the mysterious fleet, neither he nor his friends realized the true scope of what they had unleashed. The journey ahead promised danger, discovery, and perhaps even redemption, but it would demand sacrifices none of them were prepared to make. Daniel Harper's journey into the unknown began with a mix of excitement and fear. The spacecraft shuddered as it broke free from Earth's atmosphere, its engines roaring against the pull of gravity. Inside the cockpit, Daniel gripped the controls tightly, his knuckles white. He had been to space before during his days as an astronaut, but this was different. Back then, he had followed carefully planned missions with teams of engineers and scientists supporting him every step of the way. This time, he was alone, heading toward something no human had ever encountered. The ship, though hastily modified, performed admirably. Its systems hummed steadily as it sailed through the emptiness of space. Outside the small window, Earth grew smaller and smaller until it became just a pale blue dot floating in the vast blackness. Daniel stared at it for a long moment, feeling a pang of homesickness. He wondered if he would ever see his home planet again. Shaking off the thought, he focused on the task ahead. There was no room for doubt now. Back on Earth, Benjamin and Rachel worked tirelessly to monitor Daniel's progress. They set up a makeshift command center in Benjamin's lab, filling it with screens displaying live data from the spacecraft. Every beep and blip was analyzed, every movement tracked. Communication between them and Daniel was limited due to the vast distance, but they managed to exchange short messages whenever possible. "How are things looking?" Rachel asked one evening as she adjusted the settings on her laptop. Her voice betrayed both curiosity and concern. "So far, so good," Benjamin replied, glancing at the monitors. "The ship is holding steady, and Daniel seems to be doing fine, but we're still days away from reaching the coordinates." Rachel nodded, though her mind raced with worries. What if something went wrong? What if the aliens reacted aggressively? She pushed those thoughts aside, reminding herself that they had no choice but to trust Daniel and hope for the best. As the days passed, Daniel grew more accustomed to the solitude of space. He spent hours checking the ship's systems, making minor adjustments to ensure everything ran smoothly. When he wasn't working, he gazed out the window, marveling at the endless expanse of stars. It was beautiful, yes, but also intimidating. Out here, humanity felt impossibly small, a fragile speck in a universe too vast to comprehend. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the spacecraft reached the designated coordinates. Daniel slowed the ship down, scanning the area for any sign of activity. At first there was nothing, just empty space stretching in every direction. Then suddenly the instruments picked up something massive nearby. A chill ran down Daniel's spine as he turned the ship toward the source of the signal. What he saw took his breath away. Hovering silently in the void was the alien fleet, a sprawling armada of ships unlike anything humanity had ever imagined. Their designs were sleek and angular, with surfaces that shimmered faintly as though alive. Each vessel was enormous, dwarfing even the largest human-made spacecraft. Together they formed a hauntingly beautiful sight, like a city suspended in the darkness of space. Daniel's hands trembled as he activated the cameras, capturing footage of the fleet. He knew this was exactly what they needed, proof that the aliens existed. But as he watched the ships, a new realization dawned on him. They weren't moving. None of them showed any signs of activity. It was as if the entire fleet had been abandoned. "Benjamin, Rachel, can you hear me?" Daniel whispered into the comm system, his voice barely audible. Static crackled before Benjamin's voice came through. "We read you, Daniel. What's happening?" "I found them," Daniel said, struggling to keep his tone steady. "The fleet is here, but it's not what I expected. They're not doing anything. It's like they're frozen in place." There was a pause on the other end. "Frozen?" Rachel repeated, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Are you sure?" "As sure as I can be," Daniel replied. "I don't see any movement, no lights, nothing. It's eerie." Benjamin leaned closer to his microphone. "Stay cautious, Daniel. Don't approach too closely. We need to understand what we're dealing with." Daniel nodded, even though he knew they couldn't see him. He maneuvered the ship around the edge of the fleet, keeping a safe distance. As he did, the cameras captured detailed images of the alien vessels. Their shapes were strange, almost organic, as if they had grown rather than been built. Some had jagged protrusions that looked like wings, while others were smooth and rounded, resembling giant eggs. Despite their size, the ships gave off an aura of quiet menace. Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, even though there was no visible sign of life. He glanced at the readings on his dashboard, searching for any indication of energy or activity. To his surprise, the sensors detected faint emissions coming from several of the ships. Whatever these emissions were, they suggested that the fleet wasn't completely dead. "Guys, I'm picking up some kind of energy signature," Daniel reported. "It's weak, but it's there. Maybe they're in some kind of hibernation mode." "That's possible," Benjamin said thoughtfully. "If they've traveled such a great distance, they might have powered down to conserve resources. Keep recording everything you can. This could be our best chance to learn more about them." Daniel continued circling the fleet, his cameras capturing every detail. But as he worked, something unexpected happened. One of the larger ships, a behemoth at the center of the formation, began to stir. Its surface rippled slightly, as though waking from slumber. Lights flickered along its hull, casting an eerie glow across the surrounding vessels. Daniel froze, his heart pounding. Guys, I think something's happening," he said, his voice trembling. "One of the ships, it's powering up on Earth." Benjamin and Rachel exchanged worried glances. "Powering up?" Rachel echoed. "What does that mean?" "I don't know," Benjamin admitted. "But it can't be good. Daniel, get out of there, now." Before Daniel could respond, the massive ship detached itself from the fleet and began moving toward him. Its movements were slow and deliberate, almost graceful, but there was no mistaking its intent. It was coming for him. Panic surged through Daniel as he scrambled to fire up the engines. The ship responded sluggishly, its systems groaning under the strain. Come on," he muttered, gripping the controls tightly. Behind him, the alien vessel loomed larger with each passing second. "Daniel, report." Benjamin's voice crackled over the comms. "What's going on?" "They're chasing me," Daniel shouted, his voice breaking. "I'm trying to get away, but they're faster." Rachel grabbed the microphone. "Keep calm, Daniel. You can do this. Just focus on flying." Easier said than done. The alien ship was gaining ground rapidly. its glowing surface reflecting off the windows of Daniel's craft. For a moment he feared the worst, that they would destroy him without hesitation. But then, something remarkable happened. Instead of attacking, the alien ship matched his speed and positioned itself directly in front of him. A beam of light shot out from its hull, enveloping Daniel's spacecraft in a warm, golden glow. The engines sputtered and died, leaving him drifting, helplessly in space. "What the hell is happening?" Daniel gasped, frantically pressing buttons in a futile attempt to regain control. Back on Earth, Benjamin and Rachel watched in horror as the telemetry readings flatlined. "We've lost contact," Benjamin said, his voice hollow. "The ship, it's gone dark." Rachel shook her head, refusing to believe it. "No, he's still out there. We have to wait. Maybe they're scanning him or something." Minutes ticked by agonizingly slowly. Finally, the comm system crackled back to life. Daniel's voice emerged, shaky but alive. "I'm okay," he said. "At least I think I am. They're not attacking me. In fact, I think they want to talk." "Talk?" Benjamin echoed, stunned. "How?" "I don't know," Daniel admitted. "But there's something happening. It's like I can feel them. In my mind." Rachel frowned. "Feel them? Are you sure you're all right?" "I'm fine," Daniel insisted. "Just stay with me, okay? I'll figure this out." As he spoke, the alien ship transmitted a message, not in words but in images and sensations. Scenes of distant planets, swirling galaxies, and strange creatures filled Daniel's mind. He saw flashes of humanity's history, its triumphs and failures, its wars and achievements, all presented as if the aliens were trying to understand who they were dealing with. "It's incredible," Daniel murmured, awestruck. "They're showing me everything, like they're testing me or maybe teaching me." On Earth, Benjamin and Rachel listened intently, their hearts racing. Whatever was happening, it was clear that humanity had entered uncharted territory. For better or worse, the aliens had made contact and nothing would ever be the same again. The golden glow surrounding Daniel's spacecraft began to dim, and the alien vessel that had been projecting it slowly pulled back. For a moment, everything was still. The silence in space felt heavy, as though the universe itself was holding its breath. Inside his cockpit, Daniel sat frozen, trying to process what had just happened. His mind buzzed with the images and sensations sent by the aliens, visions of stars forming, planets colliding, civilizations rising and falling. It was overwhelming, like being handed the history of the cosmos in the span of seconds. On Earth, Benjamin and Rachel waited anxiously for Daniel to speak. When his voice finally came through the comm system, it was faint but steady. "I'm okay," he said, though there was a tremor in his tone. "But I don't know how to explain this. They showed me things, like memories or stories." "What kind of things?" Rachel asked, leaning closer to the microphone. Her hands were clenched into fists, her knuckles white from tension. "Everything," Daniel replied. "Planets, galaxies, life forms I can't even describe. And us, humanity. They showed me our past, our wars, our inventions. It's like they're trying to understand us." Benjamin frowned, rubbing his temples. "Understand us? Why would they care about us?" "I don't think it's curiosity," Daniel said after a pause. "It feels more like judgment, like they're weighing whether we're worth something or if we're a threat." Rachel exchanged a worried glance with Benjamin. If the aliens saw humanity's flaws, the wars, the greed, the destruction, they might not like what they found. But before either of them could respond, Daniel continued. "They're sending another message now," he said. "Not to me directly, but across all frequencies. I think they want everyone to hear it." Sure enough, moments later, the signal reached Earth. It wasn't encrypted or hidden. It broadcast loudly and clearly, overriding every communication channel on the planet. Television screens flickered, radios crackled, and phones buzzed as the same message played simultaneously in every language. The words weren't spoken aloud but appeared as text, written plainly for anyone to read. "We have observed your species. You laugh at yourselves when you should stand united. We will teach you humility." The world stopped. For a brief moment, confusion reigned. People stared at their devices, unsure if what they were seeing was real. Was this some elaborate prank, a cyber attack, or something far stranger? Then reality sank in. This was no hoax. Somewhere out there, an alien fleet had made contact and they weren't happy. News outlets scrambled to cover the event, broadcasting reactions from around the globe. Some people panicked, rushing to stockpile supplies or flee cities. Others gathered in streets and parks, staring up at the sky as if expecting the aliens to descend at any moment. Social media exploded with theories, fears, and prayers. Governments held emergency meetings, military forces went on high alert, and scientists debated how to respond. Arthur Davis, who had spent years mocking space exploration, found himself thrust into the spotlight once again. Cameras followed him. As he stormed into a televised press conference, his face red with anger. "This is exactly why we shouldn't waste resources on these ridiculous programs," he shouted, jabbing a finger at the nearest reporter. "Instead of preparing for threats here on Earth, we've wasted billions chasing fantasies in the stars. Now look where it's gotten us." Claire Simmons echoed his outrage in a hastily written article titled, "The Alien Ultimatum, Humanity's Hubris Exposed." In it, she blamed governments, scientists, and anyone else she could think of for failing to prioritize Earth's problems over space exploration. "We laughed at ourselves because we deserved it," she wrote. "Now the joke is on all of us." Their words spread quickly, fueling fear and division. Protests erupted in major cities, with some groups demanding immediate action against the aliens while others called for surrender. Conspiracy theories multiplied, claiming everything from government cover-ups to alien infiltration. Amid the EID chaos, few noticed the quiet determination of those working behind the scenes to find answers. In Benjamin's lab, the trio huddled around their monitors, replaying the alien message over and over. "Teach you humility," Rachel muttered, shaking her head. "What does that even mean? Are they threatening us, trying to help us, or both?" "It sounds like a warning," Benjamin said grimly. "Like they've seen how destructive we are and decided to intervene." Daniel chimed in through the comm system. "Whatever it is, they're serious. These aren't explorers or tourists. They're enforcers. I got that feeling when they showed me those visions. They see themselves as guardians of the galaxy, stepping in whenever a species gets too dangerous." "That doesn't bode well for us," Rachel said softly. "If they think we're a threat, we need to prove them wrong." Benjamin interrupted, his voice firm. "Show them that we're capable of change, that we can unite and fix our mistakes." "But how?" Rachel asked. "Half the world is already turning on each other. How do we convince the aliens, not to mention humanity, that we deserve a second chance?" Benjamin didn't have an answer. None of them did. All they knew was that time was running out. The aliens hadn't given a deadline, but their message implied urgency. If humanity couldn't come together soon, the consequences would be catastrophic. The hours ticked by. Daniel remained near the alien fleet, watching and waiting. The massive ships hung motionless in space, their shimmering surfaces reflecting the light of distant stars. Occasionally, one would emit a faint pulse of energy, as though monitoring the situation. Despite their earlier display of power, the aliens seemed content to let humanity stew in uncertainty, for now. Back on Earth, efforts to organize a global response were chaotic at best. Leaders argued over who should take charge, militaries clashed over strategy, and ordinary citizens struggled to make sense of it all. Some countries proposed launching attacks on the alien fleet, believing aggression was the only way to survive. Others advocated for diplomacy, urging calm and cooperation. The lack of unity only deepened the crisis. Amid the turmoil, Arthur Davis seized the opportunity to promote himself as a leader. He rallied supporters with fiery speeches denouncing the aliens and calling for resistance. "We won't bow to these invaders," he declared during a rally in New York City. "Humanity has faced challenges before and we'll face this one too, with strength and courage." Claire Simmons followed suit. using her platform to spread misinformation and fear. She claimed the aliens had already infiltrated Earth's governments and were planning to enslave humanity. Her articles gained traction among conspiracy theorists, further dividing an already fractured population. Despite the growing hostility, Benjamin, Rachel, and Daniel refused to give up. They knew the aliens' ultimatum wasn't just a test of humanity's ability to fight. It was a test of its capacity for peace. If they could demonstrate unity and cooperation, perhaps the aliens would spare them. "We need to act fast," Benjamin said during one of their late-night strategy sessions. "Find a way to bring people together before it's too late." Rachel nodded. "But how? Everyone's too busy arguing to listen." "Then we'll make them listen," Daniel said firmly. His voice carried a newfound resolve. "I'll go back. Talk to the aliens directly. Maybe if I can show them we're willing to try, they'll give us a chance." Benjamin hesitated. Sending Daniel back to the fleet was risky, but they had no better options. "All right," he said finally, "but be careful. We don't know what they'll do next." With renewed purpose, Daniel prepared to return to the alien ships. As his spacecraft turned toward the glowing fleet, he felt a mix of hope and dread. He didn't know what awaited him, or what the aliens truly wanted, but he was determined to find out. For better or worse, humanity's fate rested in his hands. The alien fleet loomed larger as Daniel's spacecraft approached, its engines humming softly in the vast silence of space. Inside the cockpit, Daniel gripped the controls tightly, his knuckles white from tension. He had volunteered for this mission knowing it was dangerous, but now, with the fate of humanity resting on his shoulders, every moment felt heavier than the last. The alien ships shimmered faintly against the backdrop of stars, their surfaces alive with an otherworldly glow. They seemed to watch him, waiting. Before he could get too close, one of the smaller vessels detached itself from the main fleet and moved toward him. Its movements were smooth and deliberate, almost hypnotic. Daniel slowed his ship, matching its speed as the alien craft hovered nearby. A beam of light shot out once again, enveloping his spacecraft in a warm, golden hue. This time, however, there was no sense of danger, only calm. The message came quickly, flooding his mind with images and sensations. "They want me to board," Daniel whispered into the comm system, his voice trembling slightly. I think they're inviting me inside." "Are you sure?" Rachel asked urgently from Earth. Her voice carried both concern and excitement. "What if it's a trap?" "I don't think so," Daniel replied after a pause. "The feeling I'm getting, it's not hostile, more like curiosity. Like they want to understand us better." Benjamin leaned closer to the microphone. "Be careful, Daniel. We don't know what they're capable of. If anything feels wrong, get out of there immediately." "I will," Daniel promised. Taking a deep breath, he powered down his ship and prepared to step outside. As the airlock hissed open, he floated into the void, tethered to his spacecraft by a thin cable. The alien vessel opened a hatch, revealing a dark interior that seemed to pulse with faint, shifting colors. It was unlike anything Daniel had ever seen. He hesitated for a moment, then pushed off gently, floating toward the opening. As he crossed the threshold, the hatch closed behind him, sealing him inside. The air was cool and smelled faintly metallic, though breathable. Lights flickered along the walls, guiding him forward. Each step sent ripples through the floor, as if the ship itself were alive. On Earth, Benjamin and Rachel monitored Daniel's progress through the cameras mounted on his suit. Every movement was transmitted back to them, grainy but clear enough to follow. They watched anxiously as he ventured deeper into the alien vessel, unsure of what awaited him. Inside, Daniel encountered the beings known as the Velari. Their forms were strange and fluid, constantly shifting between shapes that defied description. Some resembled towering pillars of light, while others appeared as clusters of glowing orbs. They communicated not with words, but with emotions and impressions that filled Daniel's mind. Fear, awe, curiosity, all swirled together as the Velari studied him. "You've come far to meet us," one of them projected into his thoughts. Though the voice was gentle, It carried an undeniable authority. "Yes," Daniel replied, speaking aloud despite the telepathic connection. "We wanted to understand your message. Why have you come to our planet?" The Velari paused, their forms rippling like water disturbed by a breeze. "Your species is young," they said finally. "But already you threaten yourselves and your world. Your divisions weaken you. Your greed destroys what you depend on to survive. We have seen this before, in others who failed to learn humility." Daniel swallowed hard. "We're trying to change. Not everyone agrees, but many of us see the mistakes we've made. We want to fix them." The Velari tilted their heads, or at least it seemed that way. Their expressions were impossible to read. "Change is difficult," they said. "And often it comes too late. Tell us, human, why should we spare you?" Back on Earth, Benjamin and Rachel listened intently as Daniel relayed the conversation over the comms system. His voice was steady, though tinged with desperation. "Because we're worth saving," he said to the aliens. "Yes, we've made mistakes, but we're capable of growth, of kindness, of unity. You can't judge all of humanity based on our worst actions." The Velari considered this, their forms pulsing faintly. "Prove it," they said simply. "Show us that you are willing to stand together, that you value life, even when it is different from your own." Daniel nodded slowly. "I'll do everything I can to help, but I need time. Please give us a chance." The Velari exchanged silent signals among themselves, their movements synchronized like dancers performing a ritual. After what felt like an eternity, one of them turned back to Daniel. "Very well," they said. "We will grant your species a trial period. Unite under a single purpose within 30 rotations of your planet. Fail, and we will act to preserve the balance of the galaxy. Succeed, and we may reconsider." Relief washed over Daniel, though he knew the challenge ahead would be immense. "Thank you," he said sincerely. "You won't regret giving us this opportunity." As the Velari escorted him back to his ship, Daniel couldn't shake the weight of their ultimatum. 30 days wasn't much time, especially given how divided humanity already was. When he returned to Earth, he found Benjamin and Rachel waiting anxiously in the lab. They bombarded him with questions, eager to hear every detail of his encounter. "They gave us a month," Daniel explained after recounting the meeting. "If we can unite globally, if we can show them that we're serious about changing, they might let us live. But if we fail, we don't have a choice," Benjamin interrupted firmly. "We have to make this work, no matter how hard it is." Rachel nodded, her expression determined. "Then we start now. We'll gather whoever will listen and spread the word. Humanity has faced impossible odds before. We can do it again." Word of the Velari's ultimatum spread quickly, thanks to Daniel's testimony and the recordings he brought back. Governments around the world convened emergency summits, debating how to respond. Some leaders argued for military preparation, fearing the aliens might attack regardless of humanity's efforts. Others called for immediate disarmament and cooperation, hoping to demonstrate goodwill. The public reaction was mixed. While some people rallied behind calls for unity, others resisted, clinging to old prejudices and fears. Arthur Davis, still riding high on his anti-alien rhetoric, dismissed the ultimatum as a hoax. "These creatures are testing us because they're weak," he declared during a televised interview. "If we show fear, they'll exploit it. We must fight back." Claire Simmons doubled down on her conspiracy theories, claiming the aliens were using mind control to manipulate world leaders. Her articles gained traction among fringe groups, fueling paranoia and unrest. Protests erupted worldwide, with crowds chanting slogans ranging from "Save humanity" to "Resist the invaders." Amid the chaos, Benjamin, Rachel, and Daniel worked tirelessly to push for unity. They reached out to scientists, activists, and influencers, urging them to promote messages of peace and collaboration. Slowly but surely, small victories began to emerge. In some regions, rival nations agreed to share resources to combat climate change. Militaries stood down, redirecting funds toward humanitarian aid. Even skeptics like Arthur Davis started to face backlash as more people realized the gravity of the situation. But resistance remained strong. Extremist groups launched attacks on key facilities, attempting to sabotage the fragile progress being made. Benjamin narrowly escaped an assassination attempt orchestrated by a militant faction opposed to surrendering national sovereignty. Despite these setbacks, the trio refused to give up. They knew failure wasn't an option, not when the survival of the human race depended on their success. As the days passed, the world held its collective breath. Would humanity rise to meet the challenge, or would it crumble under the weight of its own flaws? The answer lay just beyond the horizon, waiting to be written